Hey, I want to welcome you to this episode of HD Conversations. It's a unique one, but it's a unique part of the life of the Perfecting Church, and that is that we have relationships with leaders of other faiths. And today, I've brought on the leader of a synagogue and also a leader of a mosque. And some might ask, why would we be doing that? And in our faith tradition, this would be the purest essence of what it is to be a follower of Jesus. One of the most radical commands of Jesus was twofold: to love your neighbor, and then even took it further to love your enemy. And I think oftentimes we're really good when we think about sitting at the Last Supper table and being in love with Jesus. But I think we really struggle sitting at the Last Supper table to think about being in love with Judas. And while I wouldn't be calling any of these men Judas,
Wonder where you're going there.
but I would say that many would look at them as our ideological enemies, and may even look at them as the root of some of the issues in the world. And maybe their faith tradition might do the same. So tonight, a very, very important conversation for HD Conversations, and a very important one as we get ready to go into a new election cycle and how tribalized and divided and even violent our country becomes. So I want to start by a way of introduction. I'm assuming you know me. I'm Pastor Kevin. I'm pastor, founder of the Perfecting Church. We just celebrated our 15th anniversary, and also Loving Our Cities is the community engagement arm of the Perfecting Church. And we are endeavoring to truly be a New Testament church like one in the book of Acts, where we really are living out what it looks like to be followers of Jesus that love and impact the world around us, not just a church in the city, but being a church that loves and churches the city. So that's me. But let me introduce you and let him introduce himself to Rabbi Eli Friedman, and then to Imam Idris.
All right. Pastor Kevin, thank you so much for it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm Rabbi Eli Friedman from Congregation Rodef Shalom in Philadelphia, right on North Broad Street. We are our claim to fame, we're the oldest Ashkenazi congregation. Ashkenazi are Jews from sort of Central and Eastern Europe. Our congregation was originally a German congregation, but very diverse now. Founded in 1795. We are part of the Reform movement, Union for Reform Judaism, so a more progressive stream of Judaism here in America.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And Idris Abdul Zahir. I'm resident Imam of Master the Law, the Center for Human Excellence. We are a Sunni Islam movement that is in the West Oak Lane section of Philadelphia. We've been in existence for the last 49 years. So next year we will be celebrating 50 years.
Nice.
And we come out of a movement that was helped establish by Malcolm X here in Philadelphia. Temple number 12, and then later on it evolved into the Sister Tara Muhammad School, and then from the Sister Tara Muhammad School we established Master the Law, separate from that about 50 years ago almost. So just happy to be here and happy to be in community with you all and doing some good work in the community.
Yes, sir. About, just to give some backdrop to this, and then I want to ask a first question of us all tonight, but about a decade ago, maybe a little more, my pastor, Bob Roberts, came to me in one of the gatherings that we were having in Keller, Texas, just outside of Dallas. And I know he had begun relationships with Muslims and had begun to bring Muslims even into the church. And his reasoning behind it was that he was noticing since 2011, just the tension rising and rising and rising, as we were going into just much more divided rhetoric around Republicans, around Democrats. Our political angst was ratcheting up, particularly around the Obama administration, and as we moved to 2016, Pastor Bob went further and said that he wanted to establish something where he saw the three Abrahamic religions together in relationship, and he is a Southern Baptist evangelical, certainly believes in seeing people come to faith in Christ and being a traditional evangelical, not a political evangelical. And I asked him, why would we do such a thing? Why would we do this when it would create so much misunderstanding and so much maybe even division for us? And he said to me, because according to surveys, the most likely purveyor of hatred against Muslims in particular would be an evangelical pastor. He said they would be the most likely, according to surveys, to be the ones that get into their pulpits and espouse things that would move people towards Islamophobia. And he said he thought that it was critical that the church in our country did something about it. And he began Multifaith Neighbors Network. And you may remember, Eli, that was in the midst of or heading into the Trump first cycle of the Trump campaign and what that did around the world and certainly in our country. And so I joined him because I believed loving our neighbor, loving the Lord were the two greatest commands for us. And I realized how challenged I was myself, that I was more interested in what I defined as church health and healthy church growth than really understanding in a deep, challenging way the costly kind of love that Jesus gave that cost him his life ultimately, but certainly cost him relationships. And I know that stirs up a lot for all of us, but I wanted to start with a question for all of us, because maybe our congregants, maybe Christians are watching us today, people from the Jewish community watching us today, people from the Muslim community are watching us today and saying, why do we believe in multi-faith? Why is it something we would give our lives, our energy, our time, our resources to? And we have given a lot over the last several years. And but why is there something, Rabbi, ongoing commitment for you, Imam? Maybe if you would share the same.
Yeah. I think it's real, and I appreciate you bring up that there's real risk involved, right, in doing this work. Yeah. I remember Bob sharing with us that when
we had a friend,
when he first brought Imam Majid to his church, he had people walk out. He lost members.
Thousands.
Wow. And I remember him saying he would do it again.
Yep.
You know, any day of the week, and I fully agree with that. I think, I pray that we would not lose a lot of members. If I brought you two, I've brought you before. You're going to be with us in the next few months as we work together. I pray that there's no one in our congregation who would get upset. But I get that there is real risk, because it also just means you're putting effort into this and not into what we typically think of as our work, which is building our own congregations. Yeah. But I would go so far as to say, as one, and I would say this to any rabbi out there, that actually this multi-faith work is growing our congregation, because we are meeting new folks who actually want to be in the congregation because they live out their Judaism through this multi-faith work. They feel like it strengthens them in their own Judaism because they have to be able to express that. I remember early on when we did one of our 3-part gatherings and we were learning about different faiths, and I had a congregant who expressed sort of his belief in God, which I would say is quite different from what I understand to be a typical belief in God in the evangelical church, typical sort of understanding of God, of Allah in the Muslim faith, that was much more, I would say, amorphous, and didn't necessarily see a God that heard prayer, that did miracles in our lives. Not to say God wasn't there, but in a different way for this congregant, which in Judaism is totally acceptable. But having to explain that to a Christian, to a Muslim, actually reaffirmed his faith even more. Yeah. And it made him have to look deeper and really, what do I believe? What does my Judaism say? So I think on one end, just that idea that it strengthens our own faith and our congregations, something we talk about in this multi-faith work is that we're not looking to blend. We're not looking to create some interfaith kumbaya where we all, this is what we all agree on. Yeah. We disagree. We vehemently disagree with each other, but we still love each other. Yeah. Right. And that's really what it comes down to. So I think that has been huge. The other piece of it is just what you said about, in a world with growing polarization, with growing Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Christian rhetoric as well that we are seeing. we need each other.
Yeah.
And, there are forces at work that are trying to pull us apart, that
Yeah.
see that we are natural allies in this work. And there are forces that are looking to weaponize anti-Semitism. I
Yeah.
can say that from the Jewish standpoint, that are looking to use that as a wedge to divide communities apart.
Yeah.
And we need to push against that, because we know strong, multi-racial, multi-ethnic coalitions are what has led to greatness in this country, and will continue to lead to greatness in this country.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so for me, it's really two things that drive my commitment. The first thing is, after the Nation of Islam, our community came out of the Nation of Islam, which was a black nationalist group. And when Imam Muhammad took over leadership of that movement in 1975, he moved away from the black nationalist teachings into a more universal and orthodox understanding of Islam, which people say is Sunni Islam. And a lot of the effort then was into universal brotherhood, right? Seeing our brothers from all parts of the world as brothers and sisters, and being able to be in community with them. And so there were some specific, strategic engagements that he undertook to join our community and learn from other communities, from everything from working with politicians and working with the establishment, because a lot of the Black Muslim movement was anti-establishment, and then going out of his way to meet with Christian leaders, Catholic leaders, Jewish leaders, and drawing those bonds because of, again, the growing Islamophobia, not just in America, but in the West at the time. And so he led a national/international movement for our community, just to be more understanding, more engaging, and more inviting, and to not lose who we were as Americans, right? So this was like one of the first Islamic movements that said we are authentically Black, we're authentically Muslim, and we're also Americans, right? And there's no dichotomy. There's nothing in our faith specifically that says that those things are different, right? That we can be all of those things at once, and don't have to compromise anything. The only thing is that where those things disagree with our faith, of course, then we would, follow our faith. But other than that, though, that was our overall guidance. The second thing for me was just after 9/11.
Yeah.
There was just so much rhetoric, vitriol that was on the news, that was on TV, just about Muslims in general, and just the assumptions of on Islam and what we believe and how we practice and our faith and all these things that were foreign to me.
Yeah.
I didn't know Islam that way. Islam, where I grew up in Philadelphia, was a positive force. It was what lifted people up. It was what transformed the lives of my parents and all their peers from being street hoods and street thugs into being upstanding citizens and decent people, right? And so that's the Islam that I knew. And so this other stuff that I kept hearing about on TV was just like, this is crazy, right?
Yeah.
So what I did was I said, you know what? Every time I hear someone speaking about Islam, it's not a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
So we went out and shot a documentary, a web series called Ask a Muslim. If you want to know about Islam, you should ask Muslims about Islam. And I felt like it was a tool for us to be able to bring understanding, and to that authentic voice of what we actually believe. And if you don't like me for what I really believe, then that's fine, okay. But the things that are being used as the boogeyman and trying to draw a wedge between us, those are the things that we want to address.
Yeah. The
stereotypes and all the things that have been used to weaponize our faith, but also to draw. We've been used as a unifying agent for other groups, right? So because other groups are splintered or whatever, let's unite against the Muslims, right? Let's unite against terrorism or whatever it is, right? So we just want to make sure that that we explain our faith, share it with those that would benefit from it. Because again, as far as the African American experience has been in America, it's been one of the transformative faiths and belief systems that have allowed people to move from out of poverty, move from out of ignorance into enlightenment, and been a positive force in our community. So those are the two things that make me engage, because again, they're growing Islamophobia again, and then just you know, the way I see it is like, if we were all like, on a job somewhere as programmers, right? No one would care about our faith,
Sure.
right? Just like, can you get the job done, right? And it's all of a sudden when we get into like, our faith traditions, then it's like, well, can we work together? It's like nobody asked that question on the job. Right? If we all work for Dell or Apple, that question never comes up, right?
Sure.
So for
In
me,
most
it's
cases,
it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where, okay, well, if we can work on computers together, if we worked all at Apple someplace, why can't we work on, bettering the community together, even though our faith might be different?
Yeah.
There's enough commonality to work on something. Again, holding on to our faith, because again, I firmly believe that Islam is the best way of life for all of humanity, right? And as you probably can tell, I fervently look to convert as many people as possible. But that being said, I also understand from my faith tradition that the Christians and Jews and those people of the book, as they're described in the Quran, are also people of faith, and people that we work with in order to push the common good in society. So that's why I
Thank you.
do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I were to respond to the same question, why the investment into multi-faith relationships, why the ongoing investment into multi-faith relationships, the first for me goes all the way back to when the Perfecting Church was 8 months old. And we visited Bethlehem, the city where Jesus was born. We went on a pilgrimage. And when we were there, I had been praying about and seeking one hard part in the world where our church can make a long-term commitment to. And while I was there, this will resonate with both of you. Literally, while I was there and praying about what hard part in the world might we give ourselves in mission to, I felt like I was in Philly in Bethlehem. I'm not exaggerating. When I drove from where the Intercontinental Hotel is through the separating wall between Bethlehem and going out to Jerusalem, go up through the old city, go to Jerusalem, I literally felt like I went from the bottom in West Philly up City Line Avenue. By the time I get to Jerusalem, I feel like I'm where St. Joe's is and all. I'm not even exaggerating. When I'm there, I was like, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be, and where we're supposed to engage. And we began engaging there. And over the years, I have built relationships with Muslims. Mosque Omar, I visited and gone there, right on Manger Square. I've built relationships with Jews, and not just Jews that have been Messianic Jews, but I'm talking about people still practicing Judaism in a traditional way. And then I realized when I came home, I don't have those relationships at home. I have never leaned the church in those relationships home. Those relationships there were deepening. So going back to that original story with Bob, it was also a moment for me where I felt fraudulent in a way, because over there I had those relationships. Over here, those relationships seem much riskier and much more expensive for me as an evangelical pastor in the biblical sense and not the political sense. And so that was reason one. Reason two is deeply scriptural. In the book of St. Luke, there is an account where a lawyer in the Torah comes up, expert in the Torah, comes up to Jesus and says, "What do I need to do to have eternal life?" And Jesus' response to him is vertical and horizontal. Much to his surprise, he says the vertical response was, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. But then he adds a horizontal one that says you must love your neighbor as yourself. But it says the young lawyer, wanting to disprove him and expose him, says, well, who's my neighbor? And I think that's still the challenge today.
Yes.
I think the challenge for me and my faith, and I am an exclusivist. I believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. I believe that the way to love the Lord my God with all the heart, all my mind, all my soul, and strength, Jesus is the way to that. That being said, it should also be indicative of my salvation that I love my neighbor that way. And that became my second challenge. Who is your neighbor? And my neighbor is not just someone that shares my faith, not just someone that shares my same beliefs, not someone that is just of my same ethnicity, or any other ways that we might begin to separate ourselves from the whole of humanity. So for me, when I began living that out, much like what I heard you say, Rabbi, I found that the faith in our church became more orthodox and more faithful to the biblical text because it was refined. It was pulled out of tribal talk. It was pulled out of just talking to people that understood my faith. And we became much more layman, if you will, in how we described our faith. But also our love quotient went up in our church. Because I think without us ever having said it, people feel like we're not allowed to love each other. You know, why would we be loving each other? Because in our case, we have not understood what our book pushes us towards. And I'm sure Deuteronomy pushes you towards the same in neighbor love. And I know you've shared with me that the Quran pushes you in the same way. So while there might be much we don't agree on, one thing we do agree on, and I think must agree on, is loving our neighbor. So that became deeply lived for us as a result of the relationships that we share.
You may know this already, but the Civil Rights March, right before Dr. King spoke, there was a rabbi, German rabbi actually, Rabbi Joachim Prinz, who spoke before him, and he used that text, Leviticus 19, love your neighbor, and it is the exact question he asked. And he said, neighbor is a moral concept. He said it's not geographic, it is not all those things you listed. He said neighbor is a moral concept.
Yes.
And I just always love that line.
I think that maybe that is the most significant thing we could offer to society through our relationships and certainly our congregations. I think people are losing their ability to love those they differ with.
Yes.
Yeah. And in Islam, there's a tradition where Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he was sharing with the companions, his companions, essentially, all the rights of the neighbor, right? And one of his companions said, that the neighbor is owed so much from us that I thought that he would also inherit from me too.
Wow.
Meaning when you pass away, your possessions go. So in Islam, neighborliness and taking care of the neighbor is a high regard thing.
Yeah.
So it's and many of us know if you have great neighbors, it's a great thing, right? But if you have bad neighbors, I mean, man,
you ready to put the sign up.
Yeah, right. So I just think that it's a way of tying us together, right? Using that word, right? Because it doesn't have regard for faith, tradition, how far along your faith walk you are. Because you can have Christians that are right next door, that believe as you do but don't live as you do, right? Yeah. And we have the same experience in Philadelphia, where there's lots of different Muslims, right? Different levels of faith and different levels of just where they are in their faith journey, right? And so ultimately, I think the main thing is that it's a word that draws us all together, and it's a word that kind of pushes past what our belief system is, right? It really is what you're in this boat together, no matter what you believe. Yeah. And I believe one of the greatest ways, in our tradition, we have a concept called da'wah, which is to share the faith, right? One of the greatest ways for me to share the faith is to be a great neighbor to you. Yeah. Right? I mean, if I give you bread, give you sugar, cut your lawn, I'm sure you'll listen to 30 minutes of me talking about the faith, right? So I just think that's just part of being, walking our faith and living our faith, being a good neighbor.
I think all of us, speaking of good neighbor and purveyors of that healthy kind of faith, in our society. I think all of us, and I want to hear y'all's thoughts about this, know of peers in our particular faith that would not agree with our gathering together, that would not agree with us in this relationship together. So y'all do, right? Because I can think of some of you.
Absolutely.
And now, what do you think is the result? Because we talked about the result, all of us, about the result of costly relationships like this, if you will. But what is the result for the faith leader that plays into the hatred, creates enemies, in my context, taking scripture out of context and using it to justify hatred or bigotry or phobias? What do y'all think ends up being the result, if you will, of that kind of thing? And what comes to mind for me, and then I'll pass the mic, is when we went to DC and we were sitting with David Saperstein, Jewish brother, who was international ambassador for international religious freedom, and under the Obama administration. And David Saperstein, we sat with him in the White House, actually, the West Wing, I guess we're in, right? David Saperstein said that over 90% of the wars in the world were religious in nature. In other words, what he meant by that was people who thought they were faithfully living out their faith at odds with people of other faiths. We have some wars like that going on to some degree right now. And that was the cause. And he sat in front of, in this case, a room full of evangelical pastors, and he was encouraging us to build relationships with our neighbors that were of other faiths. Because he said most of the other faiths were global, in that many Muslims have friends and family members that live in some other country.
Right.
And when they learn how the minority is being treated here, where they're the majority, that ends up translating to how they, and likewise, you. So, but really, from your own perspectives, what would you say? How do you feel? How would you counsel someone that says we ought to be oppositional and we are diluting our faith by not being oppositional or confrontational?
I think there are many in the Jewish community, especially since October 7th, 2023, who have really just dug in on the modern state of Israel and have sort of made that their line in the sand, and will refuse to engage with any congregation, whether it's a Christian congregation that's doing amazing work in the West Bank, whether it's a Muslim congregation that honestly isn't really have that much connection to the Middle East, but they're Muslim, and therefore they view it that way. Just to be very clear, that is thankfully no one in our congregation, but I think there are those in the Jewish world, colleagues of mine especially, who I think tend to be more on the right politically, that really set this litmus test. And they say if someone is not pro-Israel, whatever that means, that we're not going to talk with them. We can't have a relationship with them. And you are doing just such a disservice. The fact is, if we're going to, first of all, this is a conflict happening thousands of miles away. We can't let that affect our work here in Philadelphia, and we have work to do. I think the other piece of it is, if we are going to actually solve any of these conflicts in the world, you don't make peace with your friends. You make peace with your enemies, with those you ideologically disagree with. And so you got to talk to people, right? And look, I understand having certain lines in terms of who you might platform, especially if they're extremists, but to refuse to even engage with someone just because they maybe have a slightly different take on an issue is doing such a disservice to yourself, to humanity, to understanding, to the opportunity that arises in those relationships.
The Quran teaches us, that Allah, created mankind in nations and tribes, so we might learn one another or get to know one another, right? And for me, coming from a scriptural background where the Quran has Moses as the most mentioned person by name in the Quran is Moses. Okay. And the story of Moses and his people is shared throughout the Quran. portion here, portion there, but he's most mentioned by name. After that is Abraham. So for us, it's hard to it's difficult, but some do. They find a way to hate Christians. They find a way to hate Jews. But I find it as the antithesis of what the Quran teaches, because it puts forth Moses and his people as the the community to learn the most from, right? And so we lean into those stories, but also lean into what was learned, right? Some Muslims, during this whole ordeal with Israel and Palestine and all these things, right? We shouldn't talk to people who are not pro-Palestine, right? So there's the other side of that coin, right? And then I say, well, that's like telling Moses to go, like, don't talk to Pharaoh, right? If you think America and all these folks are the Pharaoh, right? Then you're saying, Moses, don't go talk to him. God commanded him to go talk, to go speak, go teach the truth, to warn him, to remind him, right? If you really believe, that these people are the devil, right? Then Moses should go talk to them. Moses should go sit with them. Moses should say, hey, how you treat my people is wrong, right? And so forth and so on. So it's like the scriptures show us one thing, and then sometimes we get into our tribes and our little nations and our groups and do something different than what the scripture shows us. So for me, that's what I remind other Muslim leaders, because let's keep it real. Like right here in our multi-faith work right here, there were imams amongst the groups here that basically said, if we're not going to, speak out against what's happening, and I'm done here. Yeah. And some of them did wipe their hands and walk away, right? But for me, the thing is if we can't have conversation, if we can't have difficulty and have a conversation and work our way through the other side of it, then folks that have AK-47s and bombs, and that is done, right? So at least those of us that are not actively in the conflict should be able to have that conversation, be able to talk about it. And then, of course, not agree on everything. That's right. But also, I think, come to some common ground on shared humanity. Yeah. When we think about the civil rights movement in America, of course, we see Dr. Martin Luther King and all the folks that were with him, but it was a coalition. There were Jews involved. There were Christians, Catholics involved. It was Muslims involved. Yeah. It was a coalition of people who came, together around one cause. I just think that our scripture doesn't support it if you look at it from a holistic standpoint, and then also just how we're going to live in this world. Globalism is what is real and happening right now. Yeah. So we have to find a way to get together and live together, or die, That's right.
There's a version,
right? So. Yeah.
There's a version of extremism rising out of my faith community.
Mine too.
That is rooted in the idea that we only love to convert. And if you don't want to be converted, then get out of our country. And if you won't live Christianity with a bend towards this nation and not global, and the way that we see it, then you're not truly a Christian. And I would say Christian nationalism is neither Christian nor is it good for our nation. And most of my peers that would not embrace neighbor love or ideological enemy love, or an enemy love, those people are on a slide, knowingly or unknowingly, towards some form of extremism. And truth be told, enemy love is the opposite brand of extremism, right? That Jesus is espousing. That's what he's espousing. It's radical. And John 3:16, y'all are familiar with this. It's the most known verse of scripture in the world. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believe in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. And the point there is, this shows a love that goes beyond a love that only loves to convert, that's transaction. And it goes to a love that loves because there is a difference, a love that loves because we are converting. And so in that regard, and Bob says this often, right? Bob Roberts, Multifaith Neighbors Network. But I think we need to move beyond some of the shallow expressions in my faith of Jesus following and being a Christian, and be the type that give themselves the costly love. This is what I would say to appear. And I would say, in fact, I am not diluting the faith. I am living out the faith in a way that may appear very different because it is prayerfully extreme in its commitment to what it looks like to follow. As we close, I just want, why don't we take a few seconds and talk about what we're working on our caravan. Rabbi Eli, why don't you kick
so
that
we're
off
really excited that in honor of 250th anniversary of the founding of this country as a beacon of religious freedom and understanding and dialogue, we're excited to celebrate that through a multi-part, multi-faith dialogue series. I think we're calling it our Faith and Democracy Forum. We have we're going to do 3 sessions, one in each of our congregations, where we're going to learn. We're going to learn about what does Judaism say about democracy, about fighting polarization. We'll learn what the other traditions say at each of our places. We're actually going to have you guys over during the Festival of Sukkot in the fall, our Harvest Festival. We'll gather in our sukkah, have a nice meal, and then we're going to culminate this 3-part series with wonderful CNN reporter Dana Bash, who wants to sit down with the 3 of us. Pretty amazing, and wants to really have a conversation similar to what we're talking about now, but to really keep it going and keep that conversation going about really what does it mean to be in multi-faith partnership, to be working towards sort of democracy in this country, to fight polarization, and what are we doing in our congregations around that.
Hey, I just want to say thank you. Real, thank you for y'all being on. Thank you for being true friends. I love you guys, genuinely. If you called me, I'd come. You know, and we've traveled the world together, but I think maybe what we do at home might matter even more. And grateful for y'all. Grateful for you. Grateful for what we've been doing together. And I pray others look and catch on, and if they would like to, we would love for you to be a part of Multifaith Neighbors Network. Would love for you to join us in a retreat that we do where each of our faiths get together and have real conversations. We do not kumbaya. We talk about what we don't agree with. We talk about the very difficult things that we have seen done to one another locally and around the world. And y'all have told me, you know, how dare a Christian to ever talk about themselves being a minority or not having a voice in any way when everyone is living in, quote unquote, I would say not true, but a Christian nation. And but it has been a joy and one of the deepest learnings of my life, genuinely, to be in relationship with y'all. And I mean that as much, if not more, than seminary. How you have caused me to go deeper in my own faith, and I'm grateful for y'all. Awesome. Love you much. And looking forward to being with y'all again soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you.